The mining colony of Kepler 442c had always been considered a dead-end assignment. Located on the outer rim of human space, the planet's harsh crimson landscape stretched endlessly under twin suns that burned with unforgiving intensity. The settlement consisted of barely 300 souls, mostly automated extraction crews and their families, scraping rare earth metals from the planet's crust to feed humanity's ever-expanding stellar empire. Marcus Chen was only 12 years old when the dragons came. The boy had been born on Kepler 442c, one of only a handful of children in the colony. His parents, Dr. Sarah Chen and engineer Liu Chen, had originally planned to return to Earth after their 5-year contract ended, but complications during Marcus's birth had left them stranded. The nearest medical facility capable of handling his rare genetic condition was 3 star systems away, and the journey would have killed him. So they stayed, and Marcus grew up among the red rocks and endless mining tunnels, his world bounded by the colony's defensive perimeter and the vast, empty sky above. He was a quiet child, preferring the company of books and old Earth documentaries to the rough play of the few other children his age. His parents worried about his isolation, but Marcus seemed content in his solitude, often found sitting on the observation deck of the main habitat module, staring up at the stars with an intensity that unnerved the adults. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning when the orbital sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. Colony Administrator Reynolds initially dismissed them as solar flares or asteroid impacts, but Communications Officer Torres recognized the patterns immediately. She had served on the frontier worlds during the Centauri conflicts and knew the distinctive energy bloom of faster-than-light drives. "Ships incoming," she announced to the morning briefing, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Large ones, and they're not broadcasting any human identification codes." The colony's automated defense systems were laughably inadequate against a serious military threat. A few point defense lasers meant to clear space debris, an energy shield that could barely stop a meteorite, and enough small arms to handle the occasional pirate raid. Against whatever was coming, they might as well have been armed with sticks and stones. Marcus was in the hydroponics bay when the first ship broke atmosphere. The boy was tending to the tomato plants, a chore his mother had assigned to keep him occupied during the adult emergency meetings. He heard the rumble first, a deep thrumming that seemed to shake the very bones of the habitat. Then came the screaming. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, Marcus saw something that would be burned into his memory forever. The ship was enormous, easily 3 kilometers from nose to tail, its hull a deep obsidian black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was the shape that made his blood freeze. The vessel was undeniably organic in design, all flowing curves and ridged surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. It looked like some massive predator from the deepest oceans of Earth. Grown to impossible size and given the power of flight among the stars. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the others. They came in the ship's wake like a storm of nightmares given form. Dragons. Actual, living dragons, their scales shimmering with an inner fire that cast dancing shadows across the red landscape. They were nothing like the mythical creatures from Earth's ancient stories. These beings were clearly evolved for space travel, their bodies sleek and powerful, with membrane wings that could somehow generate their own atmospheric envelope. Their eyes burned with an intelligence that was both alien and terrifyingly ancient. The largest of them landed directly in front of the main habitat complex with an impact that cracked the reinforced foundation. Standing nearly 50 meters tall, its scales were the color of molten gold shot through with veins of silver. When it opened its mouth, the sound that emerged wasn't quite a roar and wasn't quite speech, but something that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke directly to the primal fear centers of the human brain. The colony's defenses activated automatically, point defense lasers spinning up and targeting the massive creature. The beams struck its scales and simply dispersed, like flashlight beams hitting a mirror. The dragon's head turned toward the weapon emplacements with what could only be described as mild annoyance, and it breathed. The fire that emerged from its throat wasn't normal flame. It was something far worse, a stream of plasma so hot it turned the very air into ions. The defensive positions simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant along with the unfortunate technicians who had been manning them. The acrid smell of superheated metal and worse things filled the air. Marcus watched in paralyzed terror as more dragons landed around the colony. They came in all sizes and colors, from creatures barely larger than the old Earth horses he had seen in videos to monsters that dwarfed even the golden giant. Some walked on powerful legs, others slithered like serpents, and still others floated above the ground with no visible means of support. What united them all was an aura of ancient power that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand on end. The boy's paralysis broke when he heard his mother screaming his name over the colony's communication system. Dr. Sarah Chen was trapped in the medical bay on the far side of the complex, cut off from her son by what looked like a small army of alien predators. Marcus could see her through the bay's viewing ports, pressing her hands against the transparent barrier as if she could somehow reach through it to protect him. That was when Marcus did something that would change not just his life, but the course of human history itself. Instead of running, instead of hiding, the 12-year-old boy opened the hydroponics bay's emergency airlock and stepped outside. The Kepler 442c atmosphere was technically breathable for humans, though the high sulfur content made it taste like rotten eggs and the low pressure required genetic modifications to prevent altitude sickness. Marcus had been born with those modifications, one of the few advantages of his unusual genetics. He walked out into the red dust and alien shadows without an environmental suit, his school clothes whipping around his small frame in the hot wind. The nearest dragon, a creature with scales the color of burnished copper and eyes like molten amber, noticed him immediately. It was perhaps 20 meters long, smaller than some of its companions, but still large enough to swallow Marcus whole without difficulty. The creature lowered its massive head until it was barely a meter from the boy's face, nostrils flaring as it took in his scent. Marcus should have run. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to hide, to do anything except stand there and meet the gaze of a creature that could end his existence with a casual thought. But something in those alien eyes stopped him. Behind the predatory intelligence, behind the ancient power, he saw something unexpected. The dragon was afraid. Not afraid of Marcus, of course. The idea was absurd. But afraid of something else, something that drove it and its kind across the void between stars to this insignificant human colony on the edge of nowhere. The boy had always been good at reading people, a skill that served him well in the small, isolated community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Now, impossibly, he found himself reading the emotions of a creature from another world. The dragon's fear was tinged with desperation and something that might have been grief. Whatever had brought these beings here, it wasn't conquest for its own sake. They were running from something, seeking something, driven by a need so profound it had overcome their natural isolation. "You're lost," Marcus said softly, his young voice barely audible over the wind. The dragon's eyes widened, pupils dilating in what might have been surprise. Behind it, the other creatures had gone still, their attention focused on the impossible scene of a human child speaking calmly to one of their kind. Even the great golden giant had stopped its casual destruction to observe. Marcus took a step closer, ignoring the waves of heat radiating from the dragon's scales. "You're looking for something, someone, and you're afraid you won't find them in time." The copper dragon made a sound deep in its throat, something between a growl and a whimper. Slowly, impossibly, it lowered its head until it was touching the ground in what could only be a gesture of submission. That was when the others began to arrive. From the massive black ship came more dragons, but these were different. Where the first group had been wild and desperate, these new arrivals moved with military precision. Their scales were darker, scarred from countless battles, and their eyes held no fear, only cold calculation. At their head came a dragon that made even the golden giant look small by comparison. This creature was ancient in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with power. Its scales were the deep blue-black of the space between stars, and when it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around it. Temporal distortions rippled in its wake, and the very air seemed to thicken with potential energy. The ancient dragon spoke, and its voice was like the sound of planets being born and dying. The words bypassed human language entirely, speaking directly to the listener's mind in concepts that human language couldn't properly contain. Who dares approach the children of the first fire? The copper dragon, still prostrate before Marcus, responded in the same impossible tongue. The exchange was brief but intense, and Marcus found himself understanding every word, despite never having heard the language before. The copper dragon was explaining what it had sensed in the human child, while the ancient one regarded Marcus with eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars. Impossible, the ancient dragon pronounced. The bloodlines were severed long ago. The bridge between our kinds was broken when your species was still crawling from the primordial mud. Marcus didn't understand what they were talking about, but he could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. The colony's survivors had emerged from their hiding places, drawn by the impossible scene playing out before their habitat. His parents were among them, his mother reaching toward him with tears streaming down her face. "Please," Marcus said, his voice stronger now despite his fear. "Don't hurt them. They're all I have." The ancient dragon's attention fixed on him like the gravity well of a black hole, and Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle under the weight of that regard. But he didn't look away. Something deep in his genetic memory told him that looking away now would be the end of everything. "You speak as if you have authority here, small one, as if your words carry weight that might stay our wrath." "I don't know about authority," Marcus replied, his 12-year-old voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "But I know about family, and I know about loss. That's what this is about, isn't it? You've lost someone important to you." The ancient dragon was silent for a long moment, and Marcus could feel the attention of dozens of alien minds focused on him. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for whatever would come next. "Show us," the ancient one commanded. "Show us the truth of what you are." Marcus didn't know what that meant, but he felt something stirring in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the twin suns overhead. The genetic modifications that had kept him alive since birth began to assert themselves in ways his parents' medical equipment had never detected. His vision sharpened until he could see the individual scales on the dragon's hides, each one inscribed with patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. His hearing expanded beyond the normal human range, picking up harmonics in the dragon's voices that spoke of sadness older than human civilization. And then, impossibly, he felt his feet leave the ground. Marcus rose into the air as if gravity had simply forgotten about him, his small form floating upward until he was level with the ancient dragon's massive head. Energy played across his skin like static electricity, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey, like finding a missing piece of himself he hadn't known was lost. The dragon colony erupted into chaos. The newer arrivals, the military ones with their battle-scarred hides, recoiled as if they had been struck. Several of them actually prostrated themselves on the red dirt, their massive forms pressed against the ground in gestures of absolute submission. Even the Ancient One seemed shaken, its cosmic certainty wavering for the first time in eons. "Impossible," it whispered, but the word carried no conviction now. The last prince died with the Sunset Wars. The bloodline was extinct. "What bloodline?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer would change everything. "What prince?" The ancient dragon's eyes, each one larger than Marcus's entire body, filled with something that might have been wonder. When it spoke again, its voice carried a reverence that made the very air tremble. "You are the heir of the dragon throne, child of two worlds. The blood of the first fire runs in your veins, though it has been diluted by 1,000 generations of your kind. You are what we have searched for across the dark between stars." Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a mantle made of lead and starlight. Below him, his parents stared upward in shock and fear, while the colony's survivors whispered among themselves in voices filled with awe and terror. The 12-year-old boy who had woken up that morning worried about his botany homework was gone. In his place floated something new, something that bridged two species, separated by evolution and eternity. He could feel the change taking hold, his human DNA awakening to possibilities that had lain dormant since before his species had learned to use tools. But with the awakening came knowledge, flooding his mind with the weight of cosmic history. He saw the rise and fall of galactic empires, the wars that had raged between species for millennia, and the terrible threat that now pursued the dragons across the void. He understood why they had come, what they needed from humanity, and the choice that now lay before them all. The dragons had found their lost prince. But whether that would save them or damn them all remained to be seen. The transformation had begun, but Marcus Chen was still fundamentally a 12-year-old boy who wanted his mother. As the cosmic knowledge flooded his awakening consciousness, he fought against the tide of alien memories and forced himself to focus on the familiar. His feet touched the ground with a gentleness that belied the power now coursing through his veins, and he ran to his parents despite the ancient dragon's disapproving rumble. Dr. Sarah Chen caught her son in her arms, checking him for injuries with the practiced efficiency of a frontier medic. "Marcus, what's happening to you? Your body temperature is elevated, your pupils are dilated, and I can feel electrical activity in your nervous system that shouldn't be possible." "I don't know, Mom," Marcus whispered against her shoulder, and for a moment he was just a frightened child again. "I can see things now, hear things, and I remember stuff that never happened to me." Engineer Liu Chen approached cautiously, his eyes darting between his transformed son and the assembled dragons. "The power readings from his position are off the charts. Whatever's happening to him, it's generating enough energy to power the entire colony." The ancient dragon had been watching this family reunion with something that might have been amusement, but now it spoke again, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "The awakening cannot be stopped, young prince. The blood of the first fire recognizes its own, and your human heritage only makes the transformation more interesting." "Stop calling me Prince," Marcus said, pulling away from his mother but keeping her hand in his. "I'm just Marcus. I live in Habitat Module C, I help with the hydroponics, and I collect old Earth music files. I don't know anything about being a prince or dragons or whatever this first fire thing is." "You will learn," the Ancient One replied, and there was something almost gentle in its cosmic voice. "But first, you must understand what we face. The Devourers have found us, young Marcus. They follow our trail across the void, consuming entire star systems in their hunger. We came to this small world not for conquest, but for sanctuary." The copper dragon that had first recognized Marcus raised its head and spoke in a voice like distant thunder. "Tell him about the prophecy of the last dawn, Ancient One. Tell him why the bloodlines were preserved across the dark ages." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Kepler 442c wind. The knowledge flooding his mind included fragments of that prophecy, glimpses of a cosmic conflict that made the wars of human history look like children's games. The Devourers were older than galaxies, entities of pure hunger that existed in the spaces between realities. They had been sleeping for eons, but something had awakened them, and now they moved across the universe like a plague of living darkness. The prophecy speaks of convergence, Marcus said, the words coming from the inherited memories rather than his own understanding. When the children of two worlds stand as one, when human adaptability meets draconic power, the last dawn can be prevented. You understand more than you realize, the ancient dragon observed. But understanding and accepting are different things. Will you embrace what you are becoming, or will you cling to what you were? Before Marcus could answer, the colony's emergency alarms began screaming. Communications Officer Torres's voice crackled over the speakers, tight with panic. We've got multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Massive ships, unknown configuration. And they're not responding to any hails. The assembled dragons lifted their heads as one, their earlier calm replaced by predatory alertness. Several of the younger ones began to glow with internal fire, and the temperature around the colony settlement rose noticeably. They have found us, the ancient dragon announced with grim satisfaction. The Devourers move faster than anticipated. Young Prince, your education must now proceed at an accelerated pace. Marcus felt the awakening power in his blood respond to the threat, his enhanced senses reaching out across the star system. What he perceived there made his newly developed abilities recoil in horror. The ships approaching weren't ships at all, but living things. Vast entities that had consumed entire fleets and absorbed their technology, creating hybrid monstrosities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. How many? He asked, though part of him already knew the answer. 17 primary entities, the Copper Dragon reported, its abilities apparently similar to Marcus's expanding awareness. Each one capable of consuming a small planet. They have been feeding on the outer worlds, growing stronger with each system they devour. The human colony survivors had gathered around Marcus and his family, their faces pale with the realization that their remote world had suddenly become the center of a cosmic conflict. Administrator Reynolds stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. What can we do? Our defensive capabilities are minimal and we have nowhere to run. Marcus looked at the assembled dragons, then at his own people, feeling the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his 12-year-old shoulders. The awakening power offered him knowledge and capabilities beyond human understanding, but it also came with a price. To access the full extent of his inherited abilities, he would have to surrender his human identity entirely. There is another way, he said slowly, an idea forming from the intersection of human ingenuity and draconic wisdom. The dragons are powerful, but they're also predictable. They fight the same way they've fought for millennia. The Devourers have learned to counter their tactics. You propose to teach ancient beings new methods of warfare? The ancient dragon asked, though there was curiosity rather than offense in its voice. Not new warfare. Human warfare. We don't have the raw power you do, but we're adaptable. We improvise. We use our weaknesses as strengths. Marcus turned to his father. Dad, what's the colony's power generation capacity if we reroute everything from life support to the industrial systems? Engineer Liu Chen's eyes widened as he followed his son's logic. We could generate maybe 10% of what one of these dragons puts out naturally. But if we focused it through the mining laser array and synchronized the output, we create a weapon system they've never seen before, Marcus finished. Something that combines human technology with draconic power amplification. The ancient dragon lowered its massive head until it was level with Marcus's small form. You would trust your people to fight alongside us? even though many of them still fear what you are becoming? Marcus looked around at the colony survivors. These were his people, the only family he had ever known beyond his parents. They had watched him grow up, taught him to read the old Earth books, shown him how to tend the hydroponics gardens that kept them all fed. They were miners and technicians, administrators and medical staff. But they were also humans. And humans, Marcus was beginning to understand, had something the dragons had lost over their long eons of existence. They had hope. Dr. Patterson, Marcus called to the colony's geologist. How stable are the underground mining tunnels? Could they support heavy equipment? The elderly scientist pushed his glasses up his nose, his mind already working on the problem. The main shaft goes down nearly 2 kilometers with branch tunnels throughout the mineral veins. If we reinforce the support structures, we could create a 3-dimensional battlefield, Marcus continued. Force the devourers to fight in confined spaces where their size works against them. An interesting strategy, the copper dragon mused. But how do you propose to lure entities that can consume planets into underground tunnels? Marcus smiled, and for a moment his expression was pure human mischief, despite the power radiating from his transformed genetics. We give them something they want more than anything else. We give them me. The protest from both dragons and humans was immediate and vociferous. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped in front of her son, her medical authority giving weight to her words. Absolutely not. Marcus, you're 12 years old. I don't care what kind of powers you've developed. You're still my child, and I won't let you use yourself as bait. The young prince speaks wisdom. The ancient dragon interrupted, its cosmic voice cutting through the human arguments. The devourers can sense the awakening bloodline across vast distances. It is what drew them to this system. They will focus their assault on acquiring the Dragon Prince, believing that his power will grant them access to our homeworld. But that's exactly what makes it work, Marcus insisted. They'll be so focused on capturing me that they won't notice the real trap until it's too late. Engineer Liu Chen was already running calculations on his tablet, his face pale but determined. If we wire the mining charges in sequence throughout the tunnel system, we could create a controlled collapse that would trap anything inside. But son, even if this works, there's no guarantee you'd survive being underground when those things attack. I won't be alone down there, Marcus said, turning to address the assembled dragons. Will I? The copper dragon was the first to respond, lowering its great head in a gesture of respect. Where the Dragon Prince leads, the children of the first fire will follow, even into the depths of hostile worlds. One by one, the other dragons added their voices to the pledge, until even the Ancient One had committed its vast power to Marcus's desperate plan. The boy who had woken up that morning as a simple colony child was now commanding the loyalty of beings older than human civilization. But there wasn't time for the full impact of that transformation to sink in. The Devourer fleet was already past the system's outer planets, their hybrid ships moving with purpose toward Kepler 442c. Each entity broadcast hunger and malice across the electromagnetic spectrum, their twisted consciousness seeking the source of the power they craved. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Human engineers worked alongside dragons whose breath could melt steel, creating weapon emplacements that would have been impossible with either technology alone. The dragon's natural ability to manipulate energy fields was combined with human precision manufacturing to create focusing arrays that could channel their fire into coherent beams of devastating power. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his awakening abilities allowing him to translate between human technical language and draconic conceptual communication. He could feel his human identity stretching under the strain of the transformation, but he held on to it fiercely. Whatever he was becoming, he was determined to remain Marcus Chen, son of Sarah and Liu, child of the Kepler 442c mining colony. As the enemy fleet entered the planet's outer atmosphere, the trap was finally ready. The underground tunnel system had been transformed into a fortress, with defensive positions carved into the rock walls and energy conduits running throughout the network. The dragons had taken up positions at strategic choke points, while the human colonists manned the technical equipment that would coordinate the assault. Marcus stood at the entrance to the main tunnel, his small form dwarfed by the ancient dragon beside him. His parents flanked him on the other side, their faces tight with worry and pride. "Remember," he said to the assembled forces, "the Devourers expect a traditional fight. They expect the dragons to meet them in open space, where their size and hunger give them advantages. We're going to give them something they've never seen before." "And if the plan fails?" the ancient dragon asked quietly. Marcus looked up at the massive being that had pledged its cosmic power to follow his lead. "Then we improvise. It's what humans do best." The Devourer assault began at sunset, their hybrid ships descending through the atmosphere like falling meteors of hunger and destruction. But instead of the scattered resistance they expected, they found only an empty colony and a single figure standing defiantly in the red dust. Marcus Chen, 12 years old and carrier of the Dragon Prince bloodline, raised his hand toward the approaching fleet and spoke words that echoed across dimensions. "I'm here. Come and take me." The entities that had devoured star systems descended toward what they thought was easy prey, never suspecting that they were flying directly into the most sophisticated trap in the history of human-dragon cooperation. The real battle was about to begin. The Devourers descended like a plague of nightmares given form. Up close, their true horror became apparent to Marcus's enhanced senses. These beings had once been something else, perhaps even noble creatures from distant worlds, but their endless hunger had twisted them into abominations that existed partially outside normal reality. Their ships weren't vessels so much as extended bodies, living metal fused with consumed technologies from a dozen different species. The largest of them landed directly in front of Marcus, its mass causing the ground to buckle and crack. Standing nearly 100 meters tall, it was a writhing mass of tentacles and mechanical appendages, with eyes that burned like dying stars scattered across its surface. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of reality being torn apart and stitched back together incorrectly. "Give us the Dragon Prince, small creature. We know what flows in your veins. Submit willingly, and your death will be swift." Marcus stood his ground, despite every human instinct screaming at him to run. The power awakening in his blood responded to the threat, energy crackling around his small frame like controlled lightning. "I am Marcus Chen, son of Sarah and Liu, child of Kepler 442c, and I'm not going anywhere with you." The Devourer's laughter was the sound of planets being consumed. Brave words from such a small package. "But you misunderstand your situation, youngling. We have devoured entire star systems. Your primitive colony and these few dragons are no obstacle to our hunger." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed, backing slowly toward the tunnel entrance. "But you're forgetting something important." "And what might that be, little prince?" Marcus smiled, and his expression was pure human defiance mixed with draconic fire. "Humans don't fight fair." The explosion that followed was precisely coordinated, the result of hours of careful preparation. Mining charges detonated simultaneously throughout the colony's upper structures, bringing down carefully weakened supports and creating the illusion of a devastating attack. Smoke and debris filled the air as Marcus disappeared into the tunnel entrance, apparently fleeing in panic. The Devourers took the bait completely. These ancient entities had encountered dragons before, had learned to counter their tactics of fire and fury in open battle. but they had never faced the human concept of tactical deception. They poured into the tunnel system in pursuit of their prize, their massive forms squeezing through passages that had been designed to accommodate them perfectly. What they found waiting in the depths was beyond their experience. The tunnel system had been transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield that played to every advantage the combined human-dragon force possessed. The passages were too narrow for the devourers to bring their full size to bear, while the dragons could move freely through carefully planned routes. More importantly, the humans had solved the fundamental problem of fighting entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. Engineer Liu Chen's modifications to the mining laser array, combined with draconic energy manipulation, had created weapons that could affect the devourers across multiple dimensions. The beams didn't just burn through their physical forms, they disrupted the quantum structures that allowed them to phase in and out of reality. The first devourer to reach the main chamber found itself facing not fleeing prey, but a coordinated ambush. Marcus stood in the center of a complex array of focusing crystals, his awakening powers channeling energy from the dozen dragons positioned around the cavern's perimeter. The combined output was beyond anything the entity had encountered before. Impossible, it snarled, tentacles writhing as it tried to phase out of the chamber. This level of coordination between species should not be possible. You're right, Marcus admitted, his voice echoing with harmonics that hadn't been there that morning. Dragons and humans have never successfully cooperated on this scale before, but we're good at learning new things. The attack that followed was beautiful in its precision. Human technology and draconic power merged into something entirely new. Energy beams that could track targets across dimensional boundaries, while mining charges collapsed specific tunnel sections to control the devourer's movement. The entities found themselves herded like livestock through a maze designed by creatures they had never bothered to understand. But the real surprise came when they reached the deepest chamber. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent the preparation time doing more than worry about her son's safety. Her medical expertise, combined with access to the colony's genetic sequencing equipment, had allowed her to analyze the changes occurring in Marcus's DNA. What she found there revolutionized her understanding of both human potential and the cosmic conflict raging around them. The Dragon Prince bloodline isn't just about power, she had explained to the assembled force. It's about connection, the ability to create permanent bonds between different species, to share capabilities across genetic barriers. Marcus isn't just becoming more powerful, he's becoming a bridge. Now, in the depths of the planet, that bridge was revealed in all its terrifying glory. Marcus stood surrounded by dragons, whose scales now bore traces of human genetic markers, their ancient power enhanced by humanity's gift for adaptation and innovation. In return, the human colonists who had chosen to undergo the bonding process moved with speed and strength beyond normal human limits. Their minds expanded to perceive cosmic truths that would have driven them mad just hours before. The devourers found themselves facing not separate forces, but a hybrid entity that combined the best of both species while eliminating their individual weaknesses. Dragons who could think with human creativity, humans who could act with draconic power, all coordinated through Marcus's growing abilities as a living nexus between worlds. This is not possible, the lead devourer insisted, even as its forces were systematically destroyed by tactics it couldn't counter. The bloodlines were severed. The bridge species was extinct. Not extinct, Marcus replied, his voice now carrying harmonics from across the electromagnetic spectrum. Just sleeping, and we're awake now. The battle raged for hours through the tunnel system, a three-dimensional chess game played with weapons that could reshape reality. The devourer's size and hunger, advantages in open space, became liabilities in the confined passages. Their ability to phase between dimensions was countered by weapons that could follow them across quantum boundaries. But most importantly, their ancient arrogance was defeated by something they had never learned to counter: hope. The humans of Kepler 442c fought not just for survival, but for the future. They fought for their children, for their dreams of expansion among the stars, for the simple right to exist as something more than food for cosmic predators. The dragons fought for redemption, for the chance to break the cycle of endless warfare that had defined their existence for millennia. And Marcus Chen, 12 years old and growing into something the universe had never seen before, fought for all of them. The final confrontation came in the deepest chamber, where the planet's molten core provided energy that the dragons could channel into weapons of devastating power. The last devourer, wounded and desperate, made one final attempt to claim its prize. "You cannot escape what you are becoming, young prince." It snarled as energy beams carved through its shifting form. "The transformation will consume your humanity entirely. You will become as alien to your people as we are to you." Marcus looked around the chamber at the humans and dragons who had fought beside him, their bonds now deeper than blood or species. His mother stood at the controls of a weapon array that channeled dragon fire through human technology, her face fierce with maternal protection. His father coordinated defensive positions with dragons who had shared their memories of 1,000 worlds. And all around him, colonists who had started the day as simple miners and technicians now moved with the grace and power of evolved beings. "You're wrong," Marcus said simply. "I'm not losing my humanity. I'm expanding it." The final energy beam that destroyed the last devourer was powered not just by draconic fire or human technology, but by something entirely new. The combined will of two species refusing to surrender their future to ancient hunger, channeled through a boy who had become a living symbol of what cooperation could achieve. In the aftermath, as the survivors emerged from the tunnels into the light of Kepler 442c's twin suns, they found a world transformed. The Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed, their remains scattered across the system as warnings to others of their kind. But more importantly, they had proved that the bridge between species was not only possible but powerful beyond imagination. The ancient dragon, its cosmic arrogance replaced by something approaching wonder, approached Marcus as he sat exhausted on a boulder outside the tunnel entrance. The boy's parents flanked him, their own transformations obvious in the way they moved and the new depth in their eyes. "You have done the impossible, young prince," the Ancient One intoned. "You have created something entirely new in the universe." "Just Marcus," the boy corrected, though there was new authority in his voice. "I'm still just Marcus Chen. I still live on Kepler 1442c, I still help with the hydroponics, and I still collect old Earth music files. I'm just more than I was." And what comes next, Marcus Chen, who is more than he was? Marcus stood up, his small frame somehow commanding despite his size. Around him, the surviving colonists and dragons waited for his answer. In the distance, more ships were dropping out of hyperspace. But these were different. Dragon vessels arriving in response to some signal only their kind could perceive, coming to witness the impossible. "Next, we build something better," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the red landscape with power that had nothing to do with volume. "We take what we've learned here, and we share it. Humans and dragons, working together, exploring the universe as partners instead of strangers." The copper dragon that had first recognized his nature lowered its great head in acknowledgement. "It shall be as you say, my lord." "Not lord," Marcus corrected gently. "Partner. We're all partners now." As the new arrivals landed and began to witness the transformed colony, word spread across both the human and draconic communication networks. The Dragon Prince had returned, but not as the ancient prophecies had predicted. Instead of a conqueror or a destroyer, he was a bridge builder, a boy who had found a way to merge two evolutionary paths into something greater than the sum of their parts. The age of cooperation had begun, and at its heart was a 12-year-old boy from a mining colony who had learned that the greatest power in the universe wasn't fire or technology or ancient bloodlines. It was hope, shared between friends. In the years that followed, the story of Kepler 442c would become legend among both species. How a human child had awakened to draconic heritage and used it not for conquest, but for unity. How dragons and humans had learned to fight as one against the forces of cosmic hunger. How a small mining colony on the edge of nowhere had become the birthplace of a new age among the stars. But for now, as the twin suns set over the red landscape and two species began the long work of learning to trust each other, Marcus Chen was content to sit with his parents and watch the stars come out. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build something better from the ashes of ancient fears. Tonight, it was enough to be a boy who had saved the universe by refusing to stop being human. The dragons called him Lord, but Marcus knew better. He wasn't their ruler, he was their friend, and in a universe full of ancient powers and cosmic threats, friendship turned out to be the strongest force of all.